What mechanism do you think they are? Do you think it's more linked to fatigue?
Yeah, that's a really common and simple one, right? And I think that's why volume of aerobic stimulus has been identified as a key moderator of the interference effect. I think it's performing strength training under the presence of residual fatigue. So if we're really trying to target max strength, get that really high neural stimulus, those high end neuromuscular adaptations, if we're doing that with the fatigued central nervous system from high volumes of aerobic training, we're always going to be training suboptimally. Whereas if the athlete was able to perform that type of training without that presence of residual fatigue, greater CNS output, greater intent in the rep, potentially greater velocity of movement, we know we're getting enhanced adaptation, right? That's simple. Like the more intent you lift with, the better quality you lift with, the higher that CNS drive, the better strength adaptation you get. And it's difficult to do that in the presence of residual fatigue, particularly in the lower limbs. If you look at, there's some evidence that in terms of endurance training modalities, running is the biggest elicitor of that interference effect. Tends to be not quite as severe with modalities like rowing or cycling. It's been speculated that's potentially due to that more mechanical loading associated with limb-based aerobic activity that will result, again, that residual fatigue that's going to impair performance during strength training.
So, linking, especially with fatigue and residual fatigue, because that's going to be very determined by how you create your training week, for example. And you said earlier that one of the key things that leads to an interference effect is poor programming. What would your recommendations be for anyone that is trying to balance their strength and endurance training and is trying to minimize any interference effects as much as possible?
Sure, I say this to our students all the time, and they get sick of it. What are you training? If we've already talked about it with CrossFit being a concurrent sport, that's what makes CrossFit athletes so impressive from some perspective. They've got to be good at everything. They've got to be strong, athletic, strong, metabolically, really well conditioned. For sports like that, you could argue, do you even want to, like, you're not training powerlifters? Do you even need to consider the interference effects? General advice across most sports would be just be really clear about what the aim of that training block is. Say, if the aim of that training block is to improve fatigue resistance, you don't need to think about the interference effect. It's not relevant. Okay. If the aim of the training block is to improve anything other than max or speed strength, so anything on the strength speed continuum, anything from max strength up to those more explosive strength characteristics, unless you're training any of those, it's not something you need to consider. This is something that I'm often questioned on when I'm giving this kind of information to those working in sport, is that we've got to play football. We've got to play rugby. We've got to get the guys or girls on the pitch. Yeah, I don't mean all year when we're talking about maybe lowering the volume on low intensity aerobic work. I'm talking about specific mesocycles where your priority is max strength development or speed strength development. Then we need to make sure that the training methods employed to elicit those adaptations that you're looking for are done without the presence of that residual fatigue